Hello, everyone, and welcome to the fourth video of So You Want to Conduct an Oral History Interview. My name is Gene Hardy, and I am an assistant professor at Michigan State University, and I am your host for this video series. Recall that the goal of the series is to familiarize you with oral histories and prepare you to conduct them for yourself. As a reminder, there are 4 videos in this series, including video 1, What is Oral History? Video 2, Components of an Oral History Interview, video 3, Preparing for an Oral History Interview, and this video, video 4, Conducting an Oral History Interview. If you are utilizing the Benzonia Public Library's equipment available for checkout, there is a complimentary video by photographer and videographer Jeff Smith on our YouTube channel. That video also walks you through how to use that equipment to record oral histories. To quickly recap the last video, video 3 explained how to prepare for an oral history interview, including selecting the topic and participants, conducting background research, and creating an interview guide. This video builds directly on video 3 and has the following objectives. First, you will learn about some interview basics, specifically how to ask the right kinds of questions, how to use guiding language, and the importance of note-taking. Second, you will learn how to create a space of respect for your interview participants and how to be an active listener. This is the last video in our 4-part series. So part of this purpose of the video is to bring together the things that we already covered and learn how to apply it in the actual interview scenario. At this point, if you're getting ready to interview, you should know who you are interviewing, where you'd like your oral histories to live, and have the appropriate release forms if applicable. And you should have also written some sort of interview guide with questions for your oral history interview. Now it's time to perform the actual interview. If you go into your interview just planning to read questions off of a sheet of paper, you likely won't get the best responses. Interviews are a dynamic process. While the oral history of the participant is the end goal, it requires an interviewer, you, who helps capture and elicit oral history in the best and most respectful way possible. So in interview basics, we are going to cover the following. First, we will return to information from the last video to recall how to ask appropriate questions. I will introduce you to some guiding language principles, and we'll also discuss note-taking. The wording and asking of a question can make the difference between a bad one-word answer and a great story-driven answer. Your questions need to be spoken clearly, concisely, and they also need to be open-ended. You should write your questions exactly the way that you are going to speak them, and practice your questions ahead of time, asking them out loud. Remember that you should not ask yes or no questions unless absolutely necessary for clarification. Also remember to begin your questions with the appropriate wording and language, such as how, what, or why, rather than do or did. For example, which one sounds like it's going to get a better answer? What was it like growing up in Benzie County? Or, did you like growing up in Benzie County? Guiding language is how you structure the things you say, often in the moment or during follow-up questions, to guide the oral history interview in a particular desired way. You may want to use guiding language because your participant is getting off topic, or because they brought something up that's really interesting and you want to hear more, or maybe just because you're running out of time and you really want to focus on some specific questions. For example, if you find you have an interview participant that keeps going on tangents about topics not related to the oral history, you may want to guide them to revisit something from earlier using language like, earlier you said, or I want to revisit something you said earlier. If you want someone to speak more about something, you might use language that demonstrates the value of that insight and your enthusiasm while asking them to explain more, such as, it was so interesting when you talked about that. Can you tell me more about what it was like? You may also want to signal to a participant that you're limited on time or that things are going on too long. You might say something like, oh, that's so interesting. Thank you for sharing that with me. I want to make sure I respect your time and I have more questions to get through. So what was it like? And then continue on. You can also think of the probing language that you use in asking follow-up questions as guiding language. And this can be very simple. Tell me more. Can you give me an example? How did that make you feel? Or how did that happen? This language isn't complex and it doesn't need to be tricky, but it's just a great way to gather more information with a simple question. Note-taking is another important non-spoken activity that is an essential part of conducting oral histories. Taking notes allows you to write down interesting things that were said, note opportunities for follow-up questions without needing to interrupt, write down ideas for new questions as people are talking, and have a physical log of what came up during your interview. Everyone has different note-taking styles, from people that don't really write anything down to people that try to capture as much as they can in their writing. I encourage you to be somewhere in the middle. You should focus on letting your recording device do most of the recording for you, and take your note-taking to document important opportunities for follow-up, as well as reminders for yourself. And remember that the best place to take notes is going to be on a physical printed or handwritten copy of your interview guide. There are other important parts of an interview that are more about the space and the nonverbal relationship between you and the person that you're interviewing. In other words, these are additional things that you, as an interviewer, need to be doing during the interview to make it as successful as possible. The first aspect is creating a space of respect. What I mean by this is that you want to pick a location where your interview participant is going to be comfortable, both physically as well as a place that they're going to be comfortable talking about themselves. Sometimes you might be asking sensitive questions, and you don't necessarily want to be doing that in the place that would make them uncomfortable. You also want to treat your interviewee and their experiences with respect. This means making eye contact and asking questions that show you've been listening. This is also related to the importance of active listening. Active listening refers to a pattern of listening that keeps you engaged with your interviewee in a positive way. It is a process of listening attentively while the other person is speaking, reflecting back on what is said, and withholding judgment and advice. I like this image as an example of the key components of active listening. It involves paying attention, withholding judgment, reflecting on what the person is sharing with you, and clarifying when needed. Summarizing and sharing is likely not appropriate for more oral history interviews. The goal of practicing the active listening is to not only demonstrate to your interviewee that you value what they are saying, but also active listening results in you garnering a better understanding of what is being said by giving them your full and undivided attention. Taken together, all of these things will help you conduct a successful oral history interview. We've covered a lot in our 4 videos of this series, but you should now be prepared to conduct your very first oral history interview with much success. So let's briefly recap each of the 4 videos. In video 1, I explained that oral history is a field of study and a method of gathering, preserving, and interpreting voices and memories of people, communities, and participants in past events. We discussed how oral histories traditionally were passed down person to person, but are nowadays done through interviews and recorded so that they can be preserved. We also learned in video 1 that oral histories are important because they help document unwritten histories. In video 2, we learned what an interview is and used the example of a job interview to explain how they work. We also learned about the various components of an oral history interview. In video 3, first, we learned what makes a good topic for an oral history interview and how you select participants that make the most sense for that topic. Second, I gave you suggestions on conducting background research and preparation for writing your interview guide. And also in video 3, I went into great detail into the basic elements of an interview guide, including how to write questions and ask follow-up questions during an oral history interview. In this video, we discussed the basic components of conducting an interview, including utilizing appropriate question framing, how to use guiding language, as well as note-taking. We also learned about creating a space of respect for our interview participants and the elements of active listening. As always, if you're interested in additional resources about oral histories beyond just this video, you should check out the resources provided by the Oral History Association. They have lots on their website, which is located at www.oralhistory.org. You should also check out the Michigan Oral History Association, which has its own host of resources, located at www.michiganoha.org. And of course, while you're here watching our videos, you should also check out Benzonia Public Library's own Remembering Benzie project that's located on the library's YouTube page. This marks the end of our video series. Thanks for joining me. Have a good time conducting your oral history interviews.